Okay, so today we're going to go over attachment and how this relates to your behavior for the rest of your life. So we're going to start with Harry Harlow and this idea of contact comfort, how when we are exposed to two options, if that's like food or contact comfort, often although we need food to survive, we would prefer contact comfort. So I want you to look at that video and watch which monkey those baby monkeys cling to. So something else that has to do with our attachment is being able to explore our environment. So according to Bowlby, babies use moms or dads as a secure base. So when that parent is present, if they are securely attached and if they have a good relationship, they'll be able to explore and look at the world around them when that parent is present. So let's keep going and let's talk about Mary Ainsworth's study. And so what she found is that most children had secure attachment with their caregiver. And how did she measure this? She measured this with something called the strange situation test. So this is essentially when she would place a parent in a room with a child, and she wants to know how the parent is going to respond and how the child is going to respond when the parent leaves the room. So the parent exits the room, and then we watch the child's reaction. So when mom leaves, is the child inconsolable? Is he just crying? And how does he respond when mom comes back? So when mom comes back, does he go into her arms and immediately calm down? That's generally what happens. That's secure attachment. Or does he not go in her arms? He's ambivalent. He won't return to her. Or if she picks him up, he'll want to go in her arms, then he'll push away. He'll want to go in, he'll push away. Really, this is usually taken around 18 months because that's when it's the most accurate. And this allows us to see, what type of attachment the child has developed. So what are some different types of attachment and what do they mean and why do certain children develop that? That's what we're going to talk about next. So like I mentioned, we have secure, which is most children. Okay, and then you have avoidant. So this is the child who did not want to go by mom whenever she came back into the room. And you could watch some of these on the video that I have attached for you. And then you have ambivalent. So these kids are super anxious. Even when mom is in the room, they're constantly like looking back at her to make sure that she's not going to leave them. When mom does leave, they experience extreme distress. And then when she returns and when they get to be with her, they often respond in a way that, like a push and a pull. So they might go into her arms and then pull out and go into her arms and then pull out. So why does this matter? Often our styles of attachment can bleed into adulthood. Not always. We can actually learn new attachment styles in adulthood, but sometimes they do. And when they bleed into adulthood, okay, that can affect us for the rest of our lives. So this can be anything from your romantic relationships and how you relate to, adults in your life, or it can be like just friendships. So reactive attachment disorders when you are abused, which is the other end of the spectrum. So this is when folks were abused and neglected, they have a very difficult time making attachments. So what are some things that you can do to make sure that your child has a secure attachment? And what can you do to kind of bring that into y'all's relationship? You want to basically be sensitive and aware of what they're actually needing and what they desire. So what I mean by that is like, if your child cries, now a lot of mothers already know this. They know why the child is crying and they can address the issue. So sometimes if you have a baby and they're crying, they don't want anything. They just want to like have a cuddle. Other babies are crying because they're hungry. Like maybe it's getting too close to lunchtime and they haven't had lunch yet. Or maybe it's getting too close to nap time and they haven't taken a nap yet. So being able to parcel out what it is they're asking for and what it is they need at that particular moment, and you are responding appropriately to that need, is associated with secure attachment. So when we talk about attachment, it's really important to also include the child's temperament because that may have an effect on parents' ability to kind of relate to that child and to provide the responsive care. So we're going to talk about 3 different general types of temperament. And so when you think about temperament, I want you to think about something that's an inborn trait. So we generally have a temperament. It doesn't mean that we always have to be this way, but it just so these inborn traits like our temperament can affect the way that we interact with the people around us, which can affect their response to us. So let's talk about some common types of temperament. The first one is easy baby. Most babies fall into this category. They are low intensity. They are usually very adaptable to their environment. They can accept change and they're going to be okay with it. Then you have slow to warm up babies. These babies are generally calm. They might not be as active as other babies, but eventually, you can get them to adjust. And then you have difficult babies. So these babies, they're very, very sensitive to change. Slightest changes in their routine can cause them to have meltdowns or that they don't respond like you would anticipate they would. They are agitated very often, so sometimes it can be difficult to determine what they need. So what this tells us is that your temperament matters because essentially it's going to be associated with how your parents respond to you. So if you have an easy baby, then it's usually a lot easier to make a secure attachment. If you have a baby that is a little bit more difficult, it may be more difficult for you as the parent to determine why the child is upset. And so it might be harder for you to make that attachment. So temperament does matter. But what we know is something called goodness of fit. So goodness of fit means that the environment and the child have a good fit. So if you have a difficult baby, if they have an environment that is very structured and that is very reliable and they have consistent results, whether they do something good or not so good, then they are going to thrive in that environment. They're going to make a secure attachment. They're going to be fine. But if you have an environment that's much more laid back, that kind of go with the flow, but you have a child who has a more difficult temperament, they may not thrive in that environment. Now, if you have an easy baby, that environment may be suitable to them and they may do just fine. But again, it's sort of like goodness of fit. Does the environment fit the particular child's temperament? And have we created a situation where they can be successful? So in this next section, we're going to talk about Erickson and the different stages of development. So we're going to start with trust versus mistrust. So this kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier. This is from 0 months to 18 months. So we're talking about from a baby into toddlerhood. And this is where the child determines whether or not in the world that they live in, if their needs can be reliably met. So in this particular context, are their needs reliably met? Can their needs be reliably met? And how is this going to affect their belief in the world and the people around them? So the idea is that if their needs are met reliably, then they believe that they can go into the world and get those needs met regularly, even as they grow into adulthood. So the next stage is toddlerhood. So this is autonomy versus shame and doubt. So during this stage, if you have a toddler, you know this, as a fact, toddlers start to explore and kind of engage in their environment. So what Erickson said as he was describing this particular stage is that during this stage, they're trying to develop their own sense of independence and interdependence with their environment, and they want to explore their environment. And so you want to allow them the ability to kind of explore and get comfortable in their environment. And if you do that, they will develop this autonomy, or they'll develop this sense of self that they can go into their environment and they can explore. If you do not allow them to do that, then they might develop shame. So let's go on. We're going to talk about initiative versus guilt. So from 3 to 6, this is if you had a kid this age, this is when they try to start doing things on their own. They start to show greater independence, and they may want to have like their own responsibilities. And so you want to be able to give them even small chores or things that they can do on their own. And the last one, I want you to pay particular attention to this thing that I'm going to talk about here at the bottom, because this is going to be on your quiz. So industry versus inferiority. So this is 6 to 12 years old. And there was a study from 1981, the one at the bottom, B and V, right? Look at the bottom, look at the name of it. Okay, that found that if you encouraged industriousness, or basically like a good work ethic in your children, that this was a really good predictor of their overall life success. If you encourage that work ethic from 6 to 12 years old. So basically, if you encourage them, they were more likely to have moved up in the SES realm, which is really hard to beat. Most times, all of the predictors for our success are related to socioeconomic status. But if you encourage this in childhood, they had a greater chance of being successful. So that's important for us to keep that in mind. And these are the rest of his stages. So this goes identity confusion. This is going to be teenagers finding out who they are. And then he also had some ideas about early adulthood, and as we get older into our retirement years, and then how we reflect on our life after we are done. So like at the end of our lives, on our deathbed. All right, guys, so that's it for this week. Make sure you review those and be ready for your quiz.